This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, jerks?
Manning retired.
Which one?
Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. Hausch Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Week 5 episode of the Fantasy Nerds on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, brought to you by the Fan Up Network. As always, I am your host, Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. Send me all of your fantasy questions, and I will help to guide you through Week 5 and beyond in this fantasy season. And I begin last week. I finally got my first win in the Slackjaw League, so that makes me 1-3. And for everybody playing fantasy football, we're right around we're about a third of the way through your fantasy season. And I know for everybody out there who is 1-3 like me, or even if you're winless, if you're 0-4, you're starting to grip a little bit. You're wondering if this season is just a wash, if there's anything that I can do to get back in it, or should I just stop looking at my team and just go to next season. And I'm here to tell you that there is stuff you can do. So, and that's how I'm going to start this episode, because you shouldn't just give up. You should still play out the season, because you never know. I know a couple years ago in one of my leagues, I just started horribly, and I really stopped paying attention. I still put in my lineup every week, and I ended up making it almost all the way to the Super Bowl. And I really didn't think. So anything could happen. So I'm gonna give you a couple tips of what you can do to maybe switch around your team. Now, there's the possibility that you've just been completely bitten by the injury bug. I know myself, that's one of my issues, is that I've had Russell Wilson, I have Adrian Peterson, Brandon Marshall. All those kinds of guys have been dealing with injuries, and they're either not playing or they're not playing up to their potential. So the first thing you can do, hopefully you've been looking at your waiver wire and trying to replace the guys that you can, or at least getting a little bit of better talent. Because, Adrian Peterson, he would just be sitting on my bench. So I dropped him, and I went out and got Jordan Howard of the Bears, who panned out for me last week. Definitely gave me some points. So if you can't troll the waiver wire, then the next best thing you can do is try to work a trade with somebody. In my league, I have been getting a bunch of trade offers, but they haven't been the right trade offers, because what I'm lacking right now, I do have Russell Wilson, but he has started to turn it around. I went out and got Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz has actually been performing pretty well for me as well. So my biggest deficiency is running back, because I lost Adrian Peterson. Lamar Miller's been my solid rock, but then it's a toss-up between LeGarrette Blount, Jordan Howard, Jerick McKinnon, and Ryan Matthews, who has been dealing with his own injuries. So I've been getting trade offers for Lamar Miller, giving me some random running back and a random wide receiver, or even a quarterback, which that's not what I'm going to do. Right now, I need to lean on Lamar Miller. And for my tip for you when you're trading is make sure if you're getting an offer, then make sure that you're getting a fair deal, that you're not giving up too much, and that the people on the other end are the ones who are clearly getting the better deal. The best kinds of trades are the trades that really, they help both people, and it's almost like an even trade. And when you're out there and you're proposing trades, you hate those guys who propose the dumbest deals. I'm talking about, I'll give you Denard Robinson, and how about you give me your starting running back and wide receiver? And guys on this podcast network, like John the Doc Macaroon, will actually throw out those trades, because he's kind of a jerk like that. Love John, but some of his trade ideas are a little off the wall. So when you're trying and going out and proposing trade, try and offer a fair deal. If you're trying to get somebody else's running back and you see that they need wide receivers, be able to package a decent wide receiver for one of their running backs, because even if they don't like that trade, it'll at least keep the door open for future trade offers. If they don't like this trade offer, maybe if you revise it a little bit, they might like that one, and then you got yourself a deal. Because when you offer those bad trades, it immediately shuts down, and they're not going to take any of your offers seriously. And that's what I'm probably going to end up doing. I have a bunch of wide receivers on my team. I got Brandon Marshall, Demaryius Thomas, Larry Fitzgerald, Terrell Pryor, and then if you want to put on Golden Tate, who's been awful so far. But I have a lot of wide receivers, and I'm probably going to try and package at least 2 of those guys, and maybe a running back that I have, to try and get a number 1 running back or a number 2 running back. Because I know I have Lamar Miller, and he's been pretty solid so far, but the Houston Texans seem to be running him into the ground, and he is probably going to break at some point this season. So I want to have more depth at running back than what I have right now. So definitely with trades, just keep it fair, and that's the best way. Chris Hanks, he's been on the podcast before. He's the master of trades, and as much as he trades, a lot of them don't look that bad. When you get the email saying that he's traded again, you look at what he's giving up, and he is giving up a lot of talent, but he's just changing it up, and he's playing the game the way that he plays. So make your trades. If you can't trade, if there's nothing on the waiver wire, then just play out the rest of the season. Maybe your guys are going to turn it around. And that's kind of the situation where I see myself in right now. I have guys who haven't been performing up to the standard that they normally have been. Guys like Russell Wilson, guys like Brandon Marshall, Demaryius Thomas. If all those guys could just get it together or give me at least 80% of what I know they can do, then my season's going to turn right around. So don't lose the faith, keep hope, and then just continue on with the season, because it's not going to get that much worse. So let's move on to the matchups. I'll go over Thursday Night Football just to kind of give you an idea of what happened. And probably the biggest thing to come out of Thursday Night Football is that I'm going to have to eat my words and admit that David Johnson really is one of the best, if not the best, running back in the NFL right now. He's, Drew Stanton was the starting quarterback for the Cardinals last night, so you would assume that the 49ers are just going to load the box to try and stop David Johnson. And he ran for the tune of 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. So David Johnson, clearly one of the best running backs in the league. Drew Stanton, I definitely had my question marks for what the rest of the Cardinals could do in this game. I knew there was going to be a heavy dose of Johnson, but Larry Fitzgerald, I actually benched him in my one league, and that turned out to be a horrible mistake. I figured that nobody would really get over 40 yards receiving, if anything. And Larry Fitzgerald went out, defied me, got 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I'm just going to have to live with that. I'll eat that. But the 49ers definitely didn't. They seem to be struggling. Blaine Gabbert, not the best quarterback. He had 2 interceptions. He did have 1 touchdown. But then you look at also Carlos Hyde. He, 22 carries, 78 yards, really saved his day by getting a touchdown. And probably the most surprising part of the 49ers is their wide receivers. They have Torrey Smith and then Quentin Patton, but the guy that they went out at the end of the preseason, Jeremy Curley, seems to be the best receiver on their team right now, and he's getting the majority of the targets. He had 8 catches for 102 yards and a touchdown. This is a guy that you should probably look next week on the waiver wire. If he's not already picked up, you might want to think about putting Jeremy Curley on your team just as some depth for wide receiver in case you are hurting there. So moving on to the Sunday matchups, we'll start with the biggest matchup of the year so far, probably. And it may not seem like it for the teams, but it's because Tom Brady finally coming back from his suspension. It's the New England Patriots at the Cleveland Browns. Tom Brady he's going out with a vengeance, and he is going to destroy the Cleveland Browns. I think he at least gets 300 yards And I think you put the over-under at 3 touchdowns. He might get more, and he may spread the ball around, but it might just be that he throws 3 touchdowns to Rob Gronkowski, which I'm sure fantasy owners for Gronk would absolutely love that. But Tom Brady, definitely a start this week. He's probably going to be the top quarterback this week alone. And then LeGarrette Blount, even though I think Tom Brady's going to have a field day, if they get up by enough, it's probably going to be the LeGarrette Blount show again. They're going to hand it off to him, try and finish out the game. And I also could see LeGarrette Blount easily getting 100 yards in this game in the second half. So I think LeGarrette Blount is a low-end running back option this week. The wide receivers, Julian Edelman, you're going to have to watch his status because they're unsure right now if he's going to be a go. He's dealing with an injury. But definitely, if he's good to go Sunday, he should have a pretty solid game with the return to Tom Brady. If there is no Julian Edelman, the guy that I'd probably slide in, I've been talking about him, Chris Hogan. I think he really is in that same mold of Julian Edelman, and Tom Brady's gonna find his favorite receiver, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's Chris Hogan. And obviously, Rob Gronkowski is going to. I mean, everyone benefits from Tom Brady being back, but no one more than Rob Gronkowski. He definitely has suffered with his injuries, and then last week they just got completely shut out. I think Gronkowski probably gets back on the snide this week. So on the other side, the Cleveland Browns. Cody Kessler is still not a viable starting option, probably not even owned in any fantasy football leagues. And then Isaiah Crowell really defying the fantasy gods and being productive as a Browns running back. So I think Isaiah Crowell, he's at least a running back too, if not a flex option. He continues to get yards, and you got to hope that he gets a touchdown. But the one bad thing you'll have with him this week is Browns are likely going to be down big, and they're going to go away from the run, and they'll go to the pass, and then that means more Duke Johnson, which I don't even want to start Duke Johnson in a PPR league because I just don't think the Browns are going to do too much. The only guy that I would consider starting on the Browns would be Terrell Pryor, who's become the everyman for them this year. He's really the only wide receiver, the only one that's doing anything, with no Josh Gordon nor Corey Coleman. Terrell Pryor, he's probably a flex play. I think unless you have better options on your team, you probably should be starting Terrell Pryor. Going to the next matchup, you have the Philadelphia Eagles coming off the bye, going up against my own Detroit Lions. And I am scared to death that Carson Wentz is going to come in, and he's just going to absolutely shred the Detroit Lions. Our defense is in shambles. No Ziggy Ansah, no DeAndre Levy. Our secondary has been just a complete sieve. And Carson Wentz in that offense, that conservative offense, I think he's just going to be able to pick apart this entire Lions defense. So I think Carson Wentz, you're unless you picked him up in the waiver wire and you have Tom Brady on your team, you probably should consider starting Carson Wentz this week. And then at running back, Ryan Matthews still dealing with an injury. He could play, but I think Darren Sproles is going to be the better option this week for Philadelphia running backs because in that conservative offense, there's a lot of checkdowns, and I like Darren Sproles. I like him a lot more in PPR, but he will still have value in a standard league, getting the yards and hopefully a touchdown in this game. And then the wide receiver that I'd want to start, Jordan Matthews. The Lions defensive backs have struggled against big, tall, number one wide receivers, and Jordan Matthews likely going to have a field day with this Lions defense. So Jordan Matthews is a good play, and I'm not saying I don't want to start Nelson Aguilar just yet, but if he does have a decent day against the Lions, he's going to start creeping up in my books, and I might be able to consider him as a flex play. Not just yet, though. On the other side, the Detroit Lions, Matt Stafford likely going to be getting garbage yards. I think it was kind of an anomaly last week of his play. So Matt Stafford will still probably be a good play. He'll get his yards, and hopefully he'll get a touchdown. The running back situation is a mess, but I think you're going to see a bunch of Theo Riddick in this game. I like him better in PPR formats because he's that pass-catching running back. No Amir Abdullah. No, you're not sure if you're getting Dwayne Washington, so Theo Riddick really is going to be the featured back. I think you're going to see a lot of him in this game. And then you're really going to have to watch Marvin Jones' status. He is on the injury report, and we're not sure at this point if he's going to play. If he does play, I think he probably fits in as a wide receiver 2, as a flex play. But if not, I'm not sure if I really want to start any of these Lions wide receivers. Golden Tate hasn't done anything this year, and you could make an argument, if you really wanted to, that if there's no Marvin Jones and Golden Tate is the only option, then Golden Tate could arise to the occasion, similar to what he did when Calvin Johnson was out. But Tate has just lost all my trust so far. So I'm not starting him this week, and I'm kind of leaving him alone until he proves that he can be the wide receiver that he once was. Moving on to the Redskins at the Baltimore Ravens. For the Washington Redskins, Kirk Cousins, he's a borderline fantasy starter right now. If you have somebody better, I might start him over Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins is a pretty serviceable fantasy quarterback for right now. Along with Matt Jones. Matt Jones finally kind of showed that he's shaken off his injury and that he's actually going to hold up for a little while. So Matt Jones, I think he becomes about a running back 2, at least a flex option in most situations, unless he's going up against a heavy run defense. He's going to be a pretty okay start. Going over to the wide receivers, Deshaun Jackson and Jamison Crowder both had quiet days last week, but they're still the number 1 and 2 guys on the team. Pierre Garçon had 4 catches, but in the majority of the games, it's going to go Deshaun Jackson and Jamison Crowder, with Jamison Crowder being that everyman, being that slot receiver. He's going to get you the most consistent points. And really, the number 1 receiver showed up last week, being the tight end, Jordan Reed. He had 2 touchdowns, and all those people who spent high draft picks on Jordan Reed have to feel a little bit relieved that he finally produced and gave you a little bit of relief from your dread that you drafted this tight end so high. So Jordan Reed should be good to go going forward. On the other side with the Baltimore Ravens, Joe Flacco, he's a pretty decent bye-week play right now. If you have, with all the bye weeks starting, Joe Flacco really is that serviceable quarterback. If your backup on your team is not that great, maybe they're at the bottom end of the quarterbacks, Joe Flacco is probably out there in the waiver wire. So he's a pretty decent bye week fill-in at this point. The running back situation in Baltimore is not very good. It's just unclear, and nobody gets consistent amounts of points. So I'm not starting anybody on the Baltimore running back side. The wide receivers are another question. Steve Smith has defied time, and he's proven to be a pretty decent wide receiver option. So I think right now he's probably a low-end wide receiver 2 or a flex. He's in the conversation for your flex position. And then Mike Wallace is also, he's shown that he can actually be a pretty decent flex as well. He's more of a boom or bust player, but with Joe Flacco healthy and having that big arm, Mike Wallace is definitely going to be in play most weeks for getting one of those long touchdowns. So he's really, I think he's a big flyer at flex most weeks going forward now. Going on to the Houston Texans at the Minnesota Vikings. Houston is definitely, I think they're going to struggle. The Vikings, they've seemed to figure it out. They have a really good defense that minimizes scoring for the other team, and Sam Bradford just does enough to win games. So I don't think it's going to be any different this week. Brock Osweiler probably going to struggle. I wouldn't be surprised if he throws 2 or 3 interceptions. And even though they have a ton of talent on that offense, I just think they're going to struggle. So Brock Osweiler, I probably wouldn't start him in this game. Going to Lamar Miller, I really like him, but against this Vikings defense, they're probably going to they're going to stack the box because they're going to challenge Brock Osweiler to beat them with his arm. So they're probably going to stick with running Lamar Miller. I'm just not sure how good he's going to do. You just got to hope that he gets a touchdown to give you those fantasy points. It's still stardom, but I would expect a reduced amount of points this week. And then the wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller. Again, if Osweiler struggles, both of those guys are going to struggle, and it'll probably come down to one of those guys will probably have a decent day, and the other one will have a less than stellar performance. So, I mean, I would probably put my money more on, history would say DeAndre Hopkins, but I think because Will Fuller has been kind of the guy getting it done in Houston, I think Will Fuller may actually have the better day than DeAndre Hopkins. Going over to the Vikings side, as good as they've been, I mean, their offense isn't really, it's not impressive. Sam Bradford, he's a game manager. He's not winning you games in fantasy football. So Sam Bradford, he's not a starter. With no Adrian Peterson, it's truly a running back by committee with Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata. And McKinnon had a decent week last week. I think he had around 80 yards and he got a touchdown. But that's nothing. It's nothing special. So Jerick McKinnon, probably he's a low end running back too, or maybe in your conversation for flex. And then at wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, you probably have to start him just because of how good he's been in the beginning parts of this season. So I'd probably put him in a wide receiver 2 or a solid flex play. But anybody else on the team, I don't think they score enough to really give you consistent fantasy points. So I'd steer clear of everybody else. Kyle Rudolph, maybe a question mark at tight end because there's been so many issues with tight end this year across the league. I'm not going to fault you if you go with Kyle Rudolph because he is kind of that safety valve for Sam Bradford, and you just got to hope that maybe he lucks into a touchdown. Going on to the New York Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The one good thing you can say about the New York Jets is that they're probably going to have to throw to stay in this game. So Ryan Fitzpatrick, not a good starter, but even though he may throw a couple interceptions, it's good for the wide receivers on the team if he gets a bunch of yards and hopefully gets a couple late touchdowns. So you're not starting Ryan Fitzpatrick. But Brandon Marshall, he's looking to be healthy, and I think he's going to be a good play this week. Eric Decker, he's probably looking to be out again. So Quincy Enunwa, again, going to pick up the slack. Unfortunately for the Jets, it does look like after Matt Forte had that hot start, he is starting to slow down. And I'm not sure if Pittsburgh is really the team that he's going to turn it around again. So I'm not sure. Matt Forte, probably not the best play this week, but I think he's a low-end running back too. And on the other side of the ball, though, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Le'Veon Bell is back, and I pretty much say play every single Steeler that you got. Ben Roethlisberger, definitely a starter. Le'Veon Bell, definitely a starter. Antonio Brown, definitely a starter. And then you start getting into the ancillary guys. The Marcus Wheaton, Sammy Coates, and the tight end Jesse James. They're all question marks that you could start them depending on who you have on your team. I think Marcus Wheaton and Sammy Coates they would be in the conversation for flex. And more than likely, you probably have somebody better. But those are the guys that they could give you a big day. Like, they're boom or bust. So I wouldn't start them if I have to. But also, I think they're really big boom or bust plays. So, and Jesse James, also one of those tight ends who's picked up the slack in fantasy football this year. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll wrap up the rest of the matchups that I have for you this week, and I'll give you my starts and sits. You're listening to the Fantasy Nerds on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. The Fantasy Nerd Show is sponsored by the Fan Up Network. They've developed the ultimate fantasy football app. It's a one-stop shop for everything you need. You can track teams and scores across multiple platforms, get latest injury and player news and access to expert advice, see the hot trends with waiver pickups and drops, it has everything you need to manage all your fantasy football teams. Android users can get the app in the Play Store, and an iPhone version is now available in the App Store. Go to fanupnetwork.com to learn more and follow them on Twitter at fanupnetwork. Welcome back to the Fantasy Nerds. I'm about to wrap up the rest of the Week 5 matchups I highlighted for you guys. And I'll start that with the Atlanta Falcons at the Denver Broncos. Now, Matt Ryan really has had an improbable run. And at the beginning of the season, he was really involved in the Tom Brady draft strategy. He was one of those quarterbacks who had a really easy first 4 weeks. And he's really exceeded everybody's expectations. You know, everybody expected him to actually have a good first 3 weeks, and then week 4, he was going up against the Carolina Panthers, and everybody figured that that was going to be it. But he came out last week, threw for 500 yards and a ton of touchdowns, and just still blowing everybody away. So I'm going to say, why wouldn't he do that against the Denver Broncos? I've said it before that Atlanta has all the weapons to be a good team. And so at the moment, I'm going to ride Matt Ryan. The only instance that I wouldn't be starting Matt Ryan is if I had Tom Brady on my bench waiting to come in against this awful Cleveland Browns team. So in that instance, then I'd try to trade Matt Ryan to get as much as possible just in case he does start to decline. But at the moment, I would probably ride Matt Ryan. I think he's still a top 10 quarterback, even this week, going up against the Denver Broncos. Devontae Freeman he's moved ahead of Tevin Coleman, and he's shown why he was the number 1 running back last year. So I think Devontae Freeman, even against this Denver Broncos team, I think he's going to have a decent day. He might have a little bit of reduced production, but I think he's still going to be a good play. And Tevin Coleman really kind of has fallen off a little bit, so I would probably keep him on your bench at the moment until he really shows that he can be a productive second running back on a team. Julio Jones, obviously, he's a good start week in, week out. And even if Matt Ryan does have a bad game, Julio Jones is probably still going to get his yards and at least a touchdown. And then I even say Jacob Tamme. You know, he didn't have a ton of yards, but he always seems to be a red zone threat and a target when they get down close to the goal line. So Jacob Tamme is still a pretty decent tight end. And then on the other side with the Denver Broncos, I'm not concerned about the defense, but the offense I am very concerned about. Trevor Siemian got hurt last week, and it's really questionable up in the air if he is going to play. So I would be really concerned if they are going to be relying on rookie quarterback Paxton Lynch to man this Denver Broncos they're almost Super Bowl bound again. So I'd be pretty concerned if Lynch is going to be the quarterback, but it does have repercussions all around for the entire team. If Lynch is the quarterback, then I think you're probably going to see a lot of C.J. Anderson, which would be good for C.J. Anderson owners. But on the other side, I think it's definitely going to hurt the wide receivers. With Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, I think if it's Lynch, it's probably what will happen is one of those guys is going to have a good day. And it always seems to work out that it's going to be Emmanuel Sanders. So if Lynch plays, I think Emmanuel Sanders has the better day over Demaryius Thomas. I think you still have to start Demaryius Thomas at this point because the Falcons' defense isn't that great. But I think both of these guys could have good days. I would probably put my money more on Emmanuel Sanders. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys. AJ Green is the one consistent on that team. You know, Dalton, he's not really a fantasy starter, but with the amount of targets that AJ Green gets, he's always going to be fantasy relevant, which again, I'm probably going to have to eat my words on AJ Green. So Andy Dalton, not a fantasy football starter. And I think Jeremy Hill is a very low-end running back too. He always seems to get a garbage touchdown here or there that boosts his value. So I think you probably put him in your lineup and just hope that he gets that touchdown. And everybody else on the Bengals, I'm just not super excited about. AJ Green is the one guy you really want to start on that team. And then on the other side with the Dallas Cowboys, I think Dak Prescott, I said last week he was going to have a good day. He had a pretty decent day. He had, I think, over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think he's definitely going to struggle a little bit more against the Cincinnati Bengals. He's going to see a lot more blitzing. So I think Dak Prescott, you're probably not starting him anyways, but definitely leave him on the bench this week. And I think you're going to see a lot of Ezekiel Elliott. He really emerged the past 2 weeks, rushing for 138 yards and 140 yards. I think you're going to see a lot of him against this Bengals team, and they're going to try and beat them with Elliott, their big, number 4 overall pick in the draft. And then with no Dez Bryant, you're looking at Cole Beasley and Terrence Williams, and I just think their production, it's too little to start. And if I have to start them, they're probably in the flex conversation for most teams. But I really don't want to rely on those guys to win me a fantasy game. Moving on to the San Diego Chargers at the Oakland Raiders. The San Diego Chargers really have some of the worst luck in all of football. They're a 1-3 team, but they have a really, really good offense. Phillip Rivers, I think his touchdown to interception ratio right now is 7-1. I think he has 1,100 yards. He's a fantasy quarterback that is going to get you points. It's awful for NFL wise because their defense just seems to be giving up points left and right. So the Chargers actually have a really good offense. I think Rivers is a good play this week. The Raiders don't have a particularly good defense, so Rivers going to have a good day, and he'll have to compete with that Raiders offense. And then Melvin Gordon, he's up there in the top of running back rushing touchdowns so far. So Melvin Gordon, I think he's also a good play this week. And then last week you saw Travis Benjamin, Tyrell Williams, and even Dontrell Inman. All those guys you could really consider starting this week because they got a ton of targets. None of them had less than 7 targets last week. Inman had the most targets, which I think that might be the anomaly. I think you're probably looking at Travis Benjamin getting the most, and then it's going to be somewhere between Williams and Inman getting the other targets. But they throw the ball a lot, and you really have to consider starting all 3 of these guys, really, because with the way that Phillip Rivers is throwing the ball around. Going on the other side with the Oakland Raiders, Derek Carr has been solid, and I think he's a borderline starter right now. He was one of those other quarterbacks, just like Matt Ryan, where he was in the talk of, if you draft Tom Brady, what quarterback has the best schedule to ride out that wave without Tom Brady? And I think that was actually one of the trade offers I got was somebody who has Tom Brady tried to trade me Derek Carr. I don't need Derek Carr, but I'm getting off topic. Derek Carr, I think he's a borderline starter. If I have somebody else who's better than him, I'd probably put him in over Derek Carr. But Derek Carr is still a good, reliable play this week. Latavius Murray is a little bit banged up. I think he might struggle, and whoever else is behind him will probably struggle this week. I don't really trust them. And then at wide receiver, you would think that Amari Cooper is the main guy there, but really Michael Crabtree has stolen the show. So I would ride the Michael Crabtree train as long as it lasts, but Amari Cooper is still worth starting in most fantasy leagues. Going on to the Sunday Night Football matchup, the New York Football Giants against the Green Bay Packers. The Giants have a tough matchup this week. The Packers are playing pretty decent defense, and you're just not sure what you're going to get out of Odell Beckham. That's really been the talk of the town this past week is Odell and his issues that he's dealing with, and that he's not as into football anymore, and he's not having any more fun. So they could struggle, but with the way that the Packers can score, the Giants will definitely have to keep up. So I think Eli, he's a borderline starter. If I have somebody better, I'm putting him in over Eli. but I think he's still going to have a good enough game. He'll probably get me a decent amount of fantasy points. And then the running back situation, still no Rashad Jennings. I think Orleans Darkwa, he's the guy who's getting the majority of the touches. He's a last resort start for me at this point. If I have nobody else on my team for a running back, if I have a bunch of injuries, maybe I have Jonathan Stewart, maybe I have Rashad Jennings on my team, and I need to start a running back, then Orleans Darkwa is that guy. And I just got to hope that he gets a touchdown. And then the wide receivers, they have Odell Beckham Jr., the rookie Sterling Shepard, and Victor Cruz. And with the way it's played out right now, I think Sterling Shepard has shown that he's actually the main guy right now. Not saying that Odell Beckham is probably the most talented wide receiver on that team, but right now Sterling Shepard is the guy that's getting it done. So I would probably definitely start Sterling Shepard this week, and Odell Beckham Jr. He can go one of two ways. He could really start to go on a downward spiral and just completely disappoint fantasy owners, or he could come back this week and just have a monster game. So it's deciding what's he going to give you. And really, it's not time yet to bench Odell Beckham Jr. because of the potential that he has. So I would probably ride with Shepard and Odell. Victor Cruz, he's still spotty work, and I'm not starting him, but it's a guy that I would keep on my radar. And then on the other side, I think you pretty much got to start all the Packers. Aaron Rodgers, he's one of the top quarterbacks. You're going to start him regardless. Eddie Lacy, I think he's a low-end running back 1, a solid running back 2 for most teams. Jordy Nelson has returned to form. The one guy that I have a hard time starting just because he's so up and down, and that's Randall Cobb. And he may prove me wrong and come out and have a pretty solid performance on Sunday, but I'm not trusting him this week. And the last matchup I have for you this week is the Monday Night Football game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to North Carolina to play the Carolina Panthers. Both of these NFC South teams are 1-3. They're both desperate for wins. The Carolina Panthers, coming off of their trip to the Super Bowl, really didn't expect to be 1-3. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were hoping to have a better season this year, need to get off the snide. So it's a big game for both of these teams. For the Buccaneers, I think again for this game, Jameis Winston, most weeks I think he's a pretty decent option as a starter. But up against the Panthers, even though they have been suspect and they got torched by the Atlanta Falcons last week, I do have a little bit of trouble starting Jameis Winston and what he has up against the Panthers. I think he's a borderline starter. Matt Ryan is he's a proven quarterback. He's done it, and he has a all-star wide receiver in Julio Jones. And I think Jameis Winston could be where he's at in another year or two because he's becoming a better quarterback, and he has a budding superstar wide receiver in Mike Evans, who's having a really good year. So Winston, I'd probably not start him this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has a decent game. The running back situation, Charles Sims, he's banged up, and I think even if he does play, I think he's going to have a rough night going up against the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers they're looking to win this game. They're going to play as hard as possible. So I think it's going to be a tough night for Charles Sims and any of the other running backs on that roster. And then at the wide receiver position, Mike Evans is really the only wide receiver at this point that I feel comfortable starting because I think he's going to get enough targets to get me fantasy points to win me a game. The rest of the guys, I'm just not sure, and I don't feel comfortable. So on the other side of the ball with Carolina Panthers, the defense is going to look good, and they're going to be coming after the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they're also a huge question mark because their leader, Cam Newton, got a concussion last week, still in the protocol, and they're not sure if he's going to play yet. And it's really going to be probably a game time decision, which sucks for fantasy football players because teams took Cam Newton more than likely in the first or second round and expected him to be their starter. And with him playing on Monday Night Football, you have to make that decision. Am I going to start my backup, or do I roll the dice and go with Cam Newton? Because if you go with Newton and he ends up not starting, your only option is if you can get to your waiver wire and pick up their backup in Derek Anderson. And so if you are planning to do that, to try and roll the dice with Cam Newton, make sure the rules of your waiver wire, because if you can't pick up Derek Anderson at the last minute so you can have a starting quarterback, then I would just say chalk this one up as a loss, and I would start your other guy. And even if Cam Newton does somehow come in and play, I would rather play it safe and know that a quarterback is going to start than roll the dice and not have a quarterback play for me, because that's the guy, he's going to get you the most points. So you're really going to have to monitor that situation and watch it up until Sunday, and you may not even know until Sunday. So be ready to make that decision come Sunday morning. The rest of the teams, with no Cam Newton, if he doesn't play, it's going to be a rough situation for their offense. Fozzie Whitaker, he's probably going to struggle because they'll probably load the box. Derek Anderson, when was the last time he even started a regular season NFL game? So they're going to struggle. I think Kelvin Benjamin, his role reduces, but I still think he's good enough to be a wide receiver too. The quarterback will have to throw it to somebody, so Kelvin Benjamin is going to be one of those guys, and then the other guy will be Greg Olsen. He's the tight end is always the safety valve, so Greg Olsen's still a start, and you just hope for the best for the Carolina Panthers this week. That wraps up the matchups, and it just about wraps up the show, but I can't end this show without giving you my starts and sits of the week. Last week, I went another spectacular 3-3, which I've pretty much gone 3-3 every week, except for the 1 week where I went 6-0, so I'm going to try and break the trend. But I'm giving you the big predictions. And at start for quarterback this week, I'm going to go with Carson Wentz. And you may not say that's a huge start, but there's a lot of quarterbacks out there who are projected to have really good weeks. I think Carson Wentz could be in the top 5 this week because this Detroit defense is so bad. And on the other side, I think Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to struggle. The New York Giants have had a pretty decent defense this year, and they have shut down some teams. So I think Aaron Rodgers, even though I said in my game predictions that you start all the Packers, you're always going to start Aaron Rodgers. I just think he might struggle this week. I'm going up against the New York Giants. For running back, I'm going to stay with the Philadelphia-Detroit game, and I think Theo Riddick could have a really good day. And I think him being pretty much the only running back with real NFL experience on the team right now, I think he's going to get a lot of touches, whether it's running the ball or whether it's catching it out of the backfield. And I think he could have a really good day, definitely in PPR. On the flip side, the running back who I would probably sit this week, LaShawn McCoy, the Buffalo Bills, traveling to LA, going up against the Rams, who are tied for the lead in the NFC West, which blows my mind. So I think LaShawn McCoy going up against that Rams defense, going to struggle, and I think he might still get a touchdown, but you're going to see his yards be reduced. And at wide receiver, I think Sterling Shepard going into Sunday Night Football in Lambeau Field, I think he's going to have the best day of the night for the New York Giants wide receivers. Odell Beckham Jr. may blow up, but I'm putting my money on Sterling Shepard. I think he's a really good start this week. And on the flip side, the wide receiver that I'm sitting this week, and I think he actually could have a really quiet day, is DeAndre Hopkins of the Houston Texans going into Minnesota to take on the Vikings. That entire offense is going to have a hard time against that Minnesota defense. Their secondary is frightening, and they're probably going to key in on DeAndre Hopkins and make either Lamar Miller or Will Fuller beat them. So I think DeAndre Hopkins could have a rough day on Sunday. And that wraps up this week 5 edition of the Fantasy Nerds. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any fantasy questions from now until through Sunday, even to Monday, follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. I'll tweet at me. I'll get back to you with my answer. And until next week, I'm Jason Jarvie. Later, nerds.